First, Chapter 1, you will meet Miss Vanessa Bennett.
Chapter 1, Down the River. Mama and Papa were in the orange grove pruning tree branches as the mid-morning sun rose and heated their backs. I followed close behind, picking up fallen oranges and loading them in a heavy burlap sack. The bumblebees were hard at work too, flying from orange blossom to orange blossom. I reached up to swat away a bumblebee near my head when Mama shrieked. I thought she had been stung by one of the swarming bees, but to my horror she was pointing across the grove towards the black smoke billowing from the roof of our old wooden house. Papa ran as fast as he could towards the house, grabbing a shovel and a bucket of water from near the outhouse. Mama raced behind him so quickly that she almost passed him. Together they tried to extinguish the raging inferno with buckets of water, but Mama and Papa could not refill the bucket at the pond, get across the yard, and throw the water onto the fire fast enough. Papa tried shoveling sand onto the fire to smother it. They knew their efforts were hopeless, but they kept fighting anyways. After all, this house and the few meager possessions inside it were all we had. The house was made of a type of pine wood that contained natural oils. I didn't know much about Florida woods yet, and Papa later told me these oils were very flammable. Once a fire started with this kind of wood, there was almost no chance of putting it out. The Seminole Indians who lived nearby called this type of pine lighter wood. They used it to start campfires and cooking fires. We had just moved into the house a month ago. It was 2 stories tall with a wraparound porch on the first floor. The wood floors creaked and strips of peeling paint hung from the walls. The house and the orange grove had been abandoned when we found them. Mama and Papa had spent a month cleaning and repairing the house and trying to restore the orange grove so that it would be productive again. Now the house was gone. In what seemed like an instant, we went from having a house and a future to having nothing at all. All our clothes and possessions were gone. Not that I had many possessions, only a couple of clothes, 3 books, and a modern wooden sailboat. Papa was very upset. After all, he had convinced Mama to move from the big city of Chicago to the wilderness frontier in Florida. We had no neighbors and no friends here. In fact, other than a few Seminole Indians, there were no other people within 50 miles. We did not talk much to the Seminole Indians. A few years ago, a band of Seminoles had massacred a family of white settlers near here as revenge for a white settler shooting a Seminole boy. After that, all the other white settlers moved away. This is probably why our house had been abandoned. I know Papa felt like he had let us down, but Mama and I, only 8 years old, were going to have to sleep on the ground. We had no food, no clothes, and no idea how we were going to make ends meet. But Mama didn't let Papa stew on it for too long. "Don't worry," she said, "God will provide for us." I believed her. After all, we hadn't spent a year sailing down the Mississippi River, crossing the Gulf of Mexico, and trekking down the east coast of Florida to give up now. But Mama and Papa had come from a big, wealthy families in the north. Papa was even related to President Franklin Pierce, and Mama had been a school teacher. I knew Mama's family was worried about her moving into the jungle because they sent down boxes and boxes of magazines whenever they could so we wouldn't have something to read. School was very important in my house, and Mama was teaching me how to read and write. By early afternoon, the house was a smoldering pile of ashes. Only the stone fireplace and part of the charred chimney remained. It was going to be hot. All the morning dew had already evaporated, and waves of heat were rising from the ground. I played with my shoelaces while Papa paced nervously at the edge of the grove. Toot toot! 2 toots of an air horn meant the steamboat was approaching on the river. Our house, or what was left of it, sat on the west bank of the Indian River, just south of Fort Pierce. Twice a week, a small steamboat delivered mail, news from the outside world, and any food that we had ordered from Mr. Titus's store upriver at Sand Point. The steamer was coming from the south, headed back to Sand Point. Papa waved the steamer down and told Captain Brevard what had happened. Captain Brevard looked over the ruin of our house and then said, "Well, I just came from the Jupiter Lighthouse, downriver about 40 miles. They need a new assistant lighthouse keeper if you're interested." "Can you take us?" Papa asked immediately. Captain Brevard agreed. Soon he had turned his boat around and we were headed down the Indian River, leaving behind the smoldering pile of ash that had been our house. We grabbed what few possessions we had left and set off for a brighter future.